The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, D365 Business Central, the cloud ERP everyone is talking about. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us. Just a couple of housekeeping items we'd like to mention before we begin the presentation. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please submit them through the GoToWebinar question box. We'll be following up on the presentation with some questions at the end. I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Jason Nicolau is a solutions architect at Velasio with industry experience in manufacturing, distribution, and technology. He is operationally focused with a keen eye on continuous process improvement and efficiency. He has an MBA from the University of Indianapolis and is ready to learn more about each one of your businesses. So at this point, Jason, I believe we're ready to transition the presentation over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everyone. And as Rebecca said, we are here today for an overview presentation of Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. And I am with Velasio, and our statistics show that we are a major Microsoft partner. That being said, we are targeting relationships with you so that we can further understand your business and be your voice with Microsoft to ensure that you have the best business software solutions to run your business. Business Central is quickly becoming the leading cloud-based ERP solution in the marketplace, and coupled with Microsoft's leading position in Office 365 and business intelligence like Power BI and other tools, which we'll discuss here shortly, you know that you'll be in good hands with Velasio and Microsoft. The slide here shows that Business Central is a very comprehensive solution. But for today's presentation, we will cover only a sample of the functionality available, including a focus on the financials, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and jobs. There's significant functionality in the areas of supply chain and operations, sales and service, and other areas that we plan on covering in future webinars, or we can set up personal meetings with you in the future in order to discuss those in detail for your business. So for today's journey, we'll start out with an overview. We'll take a look at some dashboards and some navigation inside of Business Central. From there, we'll move to the financials. We'll touch on the chart of accounts. We'll look at some journal entries. We'll also look at accounts payable and accounts receivable. From there, we'll move to some reporting tools, primarily the account schedule. This is a basic financial reporting tool that is designed to be very user-friendly and create financial reports for your business. Excuse me. And since many businesses are collecting information about jobs and projects and services that they provide to their clients, we'll also take a high-level look at that area of the solution as well. We'll be exposed to some of the way that the information is collected, as well as the organization, so that you can get a better grasp of profitability on every one of your jobs and projects, as well as at a company level. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Business Central. Business Central leverages a role-based architecture, and the reason why it is called a role-based architecture versus just some dashboards is because the dashboard is only part of the role-based architecture. Microsoft has built this particular product to be personalizable on every screen. It can include information. It can include as much or as little information as you see fit in order to run your business. The idea behind that architecture is to create one version of the truth so that everybody who uses the system will use the same areas of the system. We'll go into those areas that make sense for their role, but yet they're accessing the information all in one location, so that the personalizations that I just discussed are simply changing the user interface. They're not changing the functionality of the solution. This will reduce clutter, increase efficiency, and enhance the overall user experience for each one of the users inside of your organization. So let's take a deeper look at the dashboard. Today we'll start out in the business manager role. At the top of your screen, you will see a variety of menus that are available to navigate inside of the solution. The idea here is to include those areas that are important for your role. And being a business manager, you need to access just about every area of the organization. These areas can be added and subtracted by role, and they can also be controlled through security. Security can be set up in a way to allow people to read only, to have full modification ability, or they don't even know that that information exists or that information is being collected by the solution. So they simply won't be able to see that. As I scroll down into the dashboard itself, things become more graphical. You may notice the scrolling here in the upper left. This is our first exposure to some of the tools that Microsoft is using in order to present the information to you. The goal of any ERP system is to collect the information and make it readily available to stakeholders at every level. Systems that are truly impacting the business will collect information that you may not even see as being important today. And that's what's happening here. You may have noticed that some of those statistics aren't easily captured. And the idea is that the system's doing that for you and presenting that to your users so that nothing is lost. And once again, that same version of the truth is presented to everybody. That has security, of course, but everyone's able to tell the same story. Customers will receive a more consistent experience because, once again, everybody is telling the same story because they're looking at the same information. On the dashboard, you may see this area here with the pluses. That's in order to create new forms. There's also commonly used reports that can be quickly accessed for further investigation in case there's anything that needs to be examined further. As we scroll down, we'll start to see more graphical representations of information. Here are some dollar amounts as well as some activity cues here in the center section. These are navigable pieces, graphics on your dashboard, but there's also these color-coded bars. These color-coded bars are designed to indicate urgency, and these thresholds can be set at the user level. This does not require getting into any sort of coding or any functionality inside of Business Central, but what it does allow you to do is set the thresholds that make sense for your business, and then as these colors change, you can apply the proper amount of urgency. These can also be set at an administrative level so that when these items turn red, people really have the ability to understand that that's important not only to my role but important to the organization, so I need to act on that very, very quickly. As I scroll down, we'll see a donut chart that talks about the top 5 customers in the organization. This chart is drillable, so I can get to those pieces of information and learn more about each one of those graphics if I need to. There's some list views that will list information that's important for my role, as well as a portal into Power BI. We'll circle back and talk about Power BI in just a second, but before I do that, I want to identify some of those out-of-the-box roles and show you how easy it is to switch between roles inside of Business Central. Here, I'm simply accessing my settings, and I can access those roles that are offered right out of the box by Business Central. The idea is to leverage the experience that Microsoft has gained over time and provide a foundation. Typically what we see is people will find a role that's very close to what they're after, and from there they will make modifications and make the role their own so that they can optimize their experience inside of the solution. There may be a need for a sandbox company or for you to manage multiple entities inside of your Business Central instance. that can be managed, and switching between companies is just as easy as switching between roles. And those sandbox environments are incredibly important as you are hammering out the best way to execute certain processes. So you can test, look at the results, and adapt and modify as you see fit. So back to the dashboard. There is a concept that Microsoft has been spending investing, I think investing is a better word, has been investing a large amount of dollars into, and that is the idea of the stack. The Microsoft stack is defined as all of those tools that many of us use every single day, those tools that drive our productivity. I'm talking about tools like Word and Excel, also the email client that many of us use today, Outlook. Beyond that, tools like Teams and Dell, and even Skype. The goal of Microsoft is to integrate all of those tools and create a seamless experience so that all of us can be as efficient as possible and, once again, optimize our experience inside of the solution. This portal for Power BI that we see in the lower right is our first exposure to the tight integration of the stack. One thing I'd like to point out is in the upper left of your screen, please note that it says that I'm logged in to Business Central, which is true. As we look at the Power BI report, we can see a few things in the general shape of the curve, but it's difficult to identify the scale to the left and the scale on the bottom because the print is just too small. So as I expand the report, things will become much more legible. But what I need to point out is the fact that I didn't leave Business Central. The idea of the portal and the tight integration means I didn't have to log out or log in or even switch applications. All of that's happening on my screen right in front of me. Here I could see the data, and if I highlight certain data points, I will get highlighted information about each one of those particular points in time. But that might not be enough. Maybe I'd like to see this in a table format. One more click, or excuse me, a few more clicks, and I can see that information presented in a table format to help me identify why the graph looks the way that it does. Now, reporting and looking at your information and changing views used to be an assignment for IT. It would require a request to IT to change the graph, to change the report, because there's additional information or an additional filter that might make sense for you to make a decision that might be useful to you in your particular role. Power BI gives users the ability to do that. It empowers people to go that next step, to go to that next level in order to see that information. For example, if I'd like to add 2018 data to this particular chart, I could do that with one click. If I'd like to remove 2016, one more click and I'm looking at more current information. Once again, all this is being done by the user. It empowers the users to give them the ability to move quickly and have the agility to make those decisions as fast as possible. And doing all of these activities, I never left Business Central. So there's two ways to get back to our dashboard. One is to simply close out this particular portal, which is something that we're all very used to. But there's also the ability to simply click on the left here, and now I'm right back to my dashboard that includes all that information that we just spoke about. And I still have that Power BI portal to leverage for any of my analysis that I may have as I use the system. So that's one example of the stack at work. But let's take a look at how we could use the dashboard. Up to this point, we've looked at the data, we've seen things at a cursory level, but we really haven't drilled further into the information. So let's do that now. If I'm curious what's driving those 4 particular sales orders or what the details are for those sales orders, that is drillable, and I can see those 4 sales orders and understand what's going on with my business. This is a list view that we're looking at here, and this looks and feels very much like Excel, and you would expect that from a Microsoft product. Because of the fact Excel works so well and so widely used, why recreate the wheel? In fact, if you'd like to modify your view by adding a field or subtracting a field, we could personalize that, and I'll show you an example now. As I click the additional field button, there are all of my fields that are included in the table that are being collected by Microsoft, but that I may not want to show on my screen at this particular time. But for this exercise, let's say I want to add the posting date. I can drag and drop that posting date to wherever I see fit on the screen, and that's how quickly the posting date can be added. To remove the posting date, I can hide that, and that doesn't mean that Business Central isn't collecting the information. It just means I don't need to see it on my screen. And I'm right back to where I started. Now, this list view also exposes us for the first time to fact boxes. The fact boxes on the right are designed to provide additional information, in this case about the customer, in order for us to understand more about the customer and the sales order that we're looking at. In fact, these colored items here are also links to other parts of the solution. Let's take a look at the total sales. Now I'll see a list of all the sales for this particular client. But I see an invoice in red. I'm curious. I'd like to do some investigation. If I'd like to see the posted document, one more click and I'm able to see that posted document, the items that were sold, any text that may have been on that particular item, and I can understand more about that invoice. But that might not be enough. I may want to see more. Maybe I want to get all the way to the debits and credits in relation to that particular invoice. I can do that with just a few more clicks, and I can see all the GL accounts that have been impacted by that particular transaction with their amounts in order for me to truly understand what's happening with that particular invoice, as well as truly investigating any situation that may arise. I've been in solutions where I've had to use scratch pads because I'd get to a certain piece of information, I'd have to write down that piece of information, navigate back to the main menu, and navigate somewhere else to use that piece of information to finally get to what I was after. And that typically required printing a lot of pages and whatnot, but inside of Business Central, those needs are eliminated because you're able to drill down from those particular pieces of information that you may be researching. So as I back up, you will see that I am getting back to our dashboard. And each one of these tiles has those same abilities. Even the tiles above have that same ability as well. And we'll see that here in just a little bit when we talk about the accounts receivable side of the house. Before I leave this though, there's one topic that I missed, and I'm going to go back to my sales orders to present that. There's a concept in the ribbon which is our second exposure to the stack, and that is this edit in Excel feature. If I have a list of sales orders and I reshuffle the territories for my sales reps, or I have a mass change that I need to do, it might be difficult to access every sales order in the solution, make the change, and move on, especially when we're managing large amounts of orders. When it comes to something like a sales rep or some other piece of administrative data, it makes sense to have a way to mass adjust that particular information. And the way to do that is this edit in Excel feature. I don't have time in today's presentation to show you this process completely, but what I will say is the edit in Excel feature allows you to export this list that you see on your screen to Excel. You can make modifications and then publish that back to Business Central. The idea behind that is you can use methods like your drag and drop or copy and paste. Those kind of tools can be used. Autofill and those other things that make Excel so great can be used. You can update the information, publish it back to Business Central, and all of these sales orders will be updated with that current information. A few other examples that come to mind would be things like customer cards. If their sales rep changes, or if there's some other category about that client that changes, you can update that in mass in Excel and then simply publish it back to Business Central, and you will have the ability to speed up the process of updating that information. So those are two uses of the stack that I've shown so far. But there's one more, and that is Outlook. Outlook is an incredibly important tool. We use it, many of us use it every day, potentially all day long. The idea behind Outlook is to maximize your efficiency, to keep everything straight, to keep it in order, because we all are getting hammered with so much information and so many calls of action that it's sometimes difficult to keep that in order, keep it organized to meet your deadlines. The way that Microsoft has tightly integrated Business Central can streamline that process. Let's take a look at this email. This is an email that I've sent to my demo database from myself. And there might be a response, a common response, and Microsoft recognizes that. You may notice this from LinkedIn. We know that Microsoft purchased LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has that ability to send back canned, I don't want to say canned, that might be too vanilla, but those predetermined responses so that you can respond very quickly and increase that efficiency. Those are available right here. But that's not the point of accessing Outlook for this particular exercise. Here, I can open up my insights, and now what I'm opening is a window to Business Central, a portal, just like that portal I opened up for Power BI. Notice I didn't have to log in, but notice this as well. Here's my email address, and it automatically brought up the account or the customer or the contact page that's associated with this particular email address. Now I know that I received an email from this customer, and I have instant access to the information about that particular customer. Here's some more of those activity queues. These are navigable. You can search these and find more information. There are solutions out there that give you a small window in order to see some information, but that's about it. You can't really do much. But here you have full functionality of Business Central, but you just have less real estate to work with. If I would like to see more information about this balance, I could see that right here. If I'd like to conduct a transaction, I could do that as well. Let's say I'd like to start a sales quote right from inside of Outlook. Here, it's already been auto-populated with the information based on the association of this email address. Now I can add just a few items, send it by email. I can even make it an order or an invoice. All this is a real-time connection. It is a portal into Business Central. So all of these activities can be done and executed without ever leaving Outlook. So just in our introduction, I've shown you 3 integrations of the stack so that you can streamline the way that you execute your activities on a daily basis. Let's take a deeper look at the financials. We'll switch gears from the introduction and navigation, but it'll be hard to navigate away from the stack and the other productivity tools. So as I go through this next few sections, you'll see tools and you'll see familiar icons in the ribbon because of the fact that this edit in Excel or exporting to Excel or Word or even a PDF, it is always at your fingertips no matter where you're at inside of the solution. Before we jump into the financials, I would like to point out one more tool. That magnifying glass or the search tool that I clicked on in the upper right is, think of it as a search engine inside of your solution. I typed in the word invoice because there's so many activities and so many types of invoices inside the solution that Business Central recognizes the fact that there's so many of those results that it could be related to an invoice. So it's listing all those here. Not only does it list different types of invoices, but it also lists different areas inside of the solution in relation to invoices. And if you notice, I didn't have to enter a wild key or a special key in order for Microsoft to recognize that the results may not start with the word invoice. Here you can see the first few don't even start with the word invoice. In fact, this one says uninvoiced. So think of this as being right inside of your solution. you have a search engine. So if you get into activities that you may not do every day or you may not remember the name, you can use your search tool here and you can find it. So from here, I would like to take a look at the chart of accounts. This is the backbone of any financial reporting, any financial tool out there. What you may notice with Business Central is that the chart of accounts will be relatively flat. And the idea behind that is based on a concept called dimensions. Dimensions are a very powerful tool that I think I'd like to define in more detail with my PowerPoint. The way a dimension behaves is it is a tag that's attached to transactions to increase the granularity. And the idea behind it is to eliminate the need for subledgers and sub-subledgers and sub-subledgers, because those were all created in order to get to that granularity, in order to get to those reports that might be important, like profitability by department or profitability by entity or profitability by product, whatever it might be. So that's why dimensions exist, is so that you don't have to create those subledgers. You can streamline all that consolidation that would have to happen when you're producing your financial reports and all those other financial activities, because there's only one GL. That one GL can manage all types of those entries. So we'll take a look at an example of that in the solution. And I'll have a few more examples here in just a second. But let's talk about the application of those dimensions. They can be applied manually, and that means that the user has to interact with the solution in one way, shape, or form. Those could be an optional drop-down box that would populate the dimensional value, or it could be required, and that would block posting until that dimension is populated. And the third way is probably the most powerful, because it's automatically applied. And you might say, well, what drives that automatic application? Typically, that's your master data. Something like a customer card, an item card, or a vendor card will give you the ability to attach these dimensions so that each time a transaction is executed for, let's say, a customer, you could further qualify that transaction with tags like the size of the customer or the salesperson or the territory, even the customer type. On top of that, you can classify your items a step further. Maybe you want to keep track of your spending on raw material. Maybe you need to evaluate the make versus buy decision. Maybe you need to evaluate if you're going to buy a new piece of equipment. All that could be done with dimensions, because you're able to classify what you're selling without having subledgers of subledgers of subledgers that have been a common practice in many solutions in the past. Let's jump back into Business Central and see those in action. So back to my chart of accounts, I'd like to drill into my checking account balance. Here I will see activities, all those ledger entries that have been made for my checking account. But here's our first exposure to those dimensions. This department code is a global dimension, so now I could see production, I could see the different ledger entries based on the department. So now each time an office supply expense is entered, I could see if it's for my production department, sales, or admin, which will ultimately drive P&L by department. Gives me the ability to track what has been spent by each department in relation to office supplies. Now this can go beyond that, and we'll see that in action, of course. But let's take a look at the other side of those T accounts. We see that these are office supplies expense. So for continuity, you would expect to see those same entries in your office supplies GL. I use my search tool here in order to search my general ledger accounts, and I can see that there's only one office supplies expense account, and that's because I can use dimensions. As I look at the ledger entries, now I can see my production, sales, and admin lines just like I saw in my checking account. So both sides of the T are receiving these dimensional values so that you can get to that granular level of reporting to truly understand your business. From here, I'll take a quick look at some journal entries. We'll start out in the general journal. And inside of the general journal, you will have the ability to make a variety of entries based on your needs. First of all, the document type. There's a variety of document types that can be referenced so that your ledger entries are clear and there's not a large amount of research that's required after you make the entry because you've provided enough detail to your users to understand the reason for this particular entry. There's different account types as well. Once again, this is designed to clarify your ledger entries to make sure that it is understandable, auditable, and clear for everyone in the organization. And lo and behold, here's our dimension code again. What I'd like to point out here is that dimension code is a drop-down menu. The idea here is for consistency. I don't know about you, but I've definitely ran across many different abbreviations for administration, whether it's admin, ADM, ADMI, NIS, period, all those things. So that could cause convoluted reporting. That could cause confusion. So inside of Business Central, in those cases, drop-down menus are made available so that there's consistency. Each time that ledger entry is made and further qualified with a dimension, the same values will be used to further clarify the reasoning behind that particular entry. Another type of journal entry would be something like a recurring journal entry. A recurring journal entry would be something like, let's say, your rent expense. And that is a fixed amount, and it occurs every month. And you could create an engine inside of Business Central that will create that payable every month. But let's talk about the allocation. Many organizations would like to allocate this particular expense across departments. And in this case, the example is a split 20-60-20 percentage-wise by department. We'll see dimensions at play again because we see that that first 20% allocation is for the admin department. That second line will be for production. The idea here is it could be that you would like to just simply assign more expense to production, or that they take up more real estate inside of your organization, so it makes sense for you to charge them more of the rent expense. And this would ultimately boil down to profitability by department. You can see how the P&L by this particular measure can be continuously managed. So you're always seeing what's happening inside of your organization so that you can get to that granular level of reportability and make decisions that make sense for your business, that keep you agile, but keep you moving forward inside of your organization. So aging. Let's switch gears to the accounts receivable side. There are two major concepts inside of accounts receivable. First of all, you want to know when anything's overdue, and also you'd like to know when anything is or not when it's past due, but you'd like to know how long it's been due, so that you can forecast other things like your cash flow and your capital needs. Inside of Business Central, you'll have that ability, and also the ability to apply filters. Remember, when I looked at that Power BI report, I have the ability to add filters, that slicer that was available to change the date. Well, inside of Business Central, you have the ability to add those filters as well, so that you can conduct a more narrow analysis into your organization. Inside of each one of these drop-downs will be a wide variety of fields that can be used to create a more filtered view. Once again, eliminating the need for IT because I'm able to run my own report. This is an example. This aged accounts receivable report is an example of one of the several hundred reports that are offered right out of the box and that have the ability to be filtered by a variety of measures so that you could get to the information that you need without writing a custom report. Our first look will be at a high level. This high level account, the high level accounts receivable simply shows the client and what's due from that client and some aging information. but that might not be enough, excuse me. So we may want to look at a more detailed look. And we'll take a look at those filters in place. So now I'd like to print the detail, and I'd like to take a look at a particular customer, Tray Research, in order to see what their aging looks like. Now, I only have Tray Research on the report, but I also have each one of their invoices in order to see how old those particular invoices are, and I could follow up on them if there was an issue or if there's some other reason why they haven't paid that particular invoice. And if I'd like to remove that filter from my accounts receivable report, simply back it off. And if I preview it again, now I can see all my customers listed on the report. So now I can see the details for each one of my customers. If you have a large amount of customers, you can see how this report could grow very quickly, but you still have that visibility as far as the age of your accounts receivable. Accounts payable behaves in a very similar fashion. So for this exercise, before I move on to the accounts payable side, I'd like to go back to our dashboard. And on our dashboard, we have the overdue sales invoice amount. If I'd like to see what's on that particular list, I can see that right here, right from the dashboard. There's my edit in Excel. If I'd like to send this to Excel, I could do that, make my changes, and potentially publish those back to Business Central. Or I could simply send it to Excel for my records. If there's some other technique or process that I'd like to do, I could do that by simply sending that to Excel right from here. Remember that drillability that I showed you at the beginning with the dashboard? Well, that same power is right here. If I'd like to see that posted document, there it is. I can see all the items that were sold and the other details. If that's not enough, I do have the ability to navigate, and I could, from here, I can see the posted sales invoice, but there's those GL entries. Here's an example of a more complex posting routine that shows some other entries that have been made in order to balance out that particular transaction. And we can see every one of those with just a few clicks from our dashboard. So as I said, accounts receivable and accounts payable behave in a very similar fashion. But there is a tool on the accounts payable side that I'd like to show you. And where that tool is housed is in the payment journal. Excuse me. Selected the wrong option when I searched for that one. Payment journal, there we go. So as I get into the cash batch, we can see that there's two new tools that have surfaced. This is a suggest vendor payments and a suggest employee payments. Inside of Business Central, there is a separation between the two. No longer do you have to create your employees as vendors in order to pay their expenses. You can segregate the process between the two so that your vendor payments are separate from your employee payments. But that's not the real power of this particular screen. If I go to the suggest vendor payments, this is actually an engine inside of the solution that's looking out at all the payments that are due inside of the organization and making suggestions for me. There are a variety of modifiers out there that can be used, such as priority and other payment terms that you would list on the vendor card. But the idea behind it is to never let a payable or a discount go unnoticed. There's no reason for those to be late because you can use this particular engine to pull in all of those various payments. If you'd like to filter those results, you can do that as well. If you would like to narrow it down to a particular vendor, let's say. So from here, as the engine's going out to the solution and finding out which payables I should pay this batch, we can see a listing of a variety of vendors. And we also see that I could use a variety of payment methods in order to meet my obligations. If I were to default this value on the vendor card, then there would be more fields pre-populated, and I'd be able to process this in a batch format. So not only do you get an engine in order to collect those payments so that the logic that inside the solution is doing the work for you, but you also have the ability to identify those payables that you may not want to pay for this particular batch. Highlighting line 1, let's say I don't want to pay vendor $10,000, there may be an issue, so I'd like to hold back payment for that particular invoice. So what I can do is I can simply delete that line. This doesn't delete the payable, it just deletes it from this particular batch. Now I could process the rest of these payables and complete my transactions, apply entries as needed, print checks, and so on and so forth, so that I can leverage a batch process and work on the payables for vendor 10,000 at a different time, or after the resolution has been identified for that particular vendor. So from here, I'd like to move on to reporting. So far, we've looked at an overview of Business Central. We've certainly navigated through several different areas. We've seen the stack at play through Power BI, as well as the Outlook integration, Excel. But we've also seen the financial backbone. We've seen the chart of accounts and how you can get to those pieces of information that are important, as well as the concept of dimensions and the ability to create a P&L by those measures that are important to your organization. Let's see the result of the use of dimensions and the use of the solution, and we'll take a look at that through account schedules. An account schedule is the basic reporting tool that's available right out of the box for Business Central. For today's exercise, we'll take a look at the income statement. The income statement is a very powerful tool because it allows you to see the profit for your organization. It also is a great tool to identify the health of your organization. Here we can see the structure of the income statement. The totaling column in the center includes a variety of GLs. Here is a range of GLs as well as another range. So inside of this first line, there's actually two ranges that'll be summed in order to present the value. As we scroll down, you will see that the report can reference itself. This P1 to P8 corresponds with P1 to P8 in the left. So now, not only am I pulling information from my particular GLs, but I'm also executing math inside of the report so that I could get a better look at what's happening inside of my organization. So let's take a look at the result of this particular report. I'm taking a look at a yearly view, and now I can see a profit and loss statement or an income statement for my entire organization. At the organization level, it might be interesting to do more research. You might be curious about this service income listed here. I can execute those same methods for research. Now I'm looking at the ledger entries that are driving that particular amount. Now I can see the invoices that are driving the amount that was listed on my account schedule. If I'd like to see the GL entries that are associated with each line, I could get all the way down to the debits and credits, including the GL accounts for every one of those lines on my account schedule. But as I said, this is a company-wide look. This is a company-wide view of the organization. It might be important to see that view by department. It might be important to see this view by entity, by product type, by location, if you have multiple locations for your organization. All that can be achieved by changing the column layout. Here I'll use departments as part of the rest of the presentation, but there's not a large amount of data for 2018. So I'll leverage another tool inside of the account schedule that allows me to walk through time. Please note the date filter. It says I'm looking from January 1st to December of 2018. If I look at the previous annual period, I can see 2017, 16, 15, and so on and so forth. And this gives me the ability to walk through time. If I look at 2017 and scroll down a little, I can see that these entries have been further qualified and allow me to see my profit and loss by department. And these are drillable, just like the other entries. So if I'm curious what's driving that $750 balance, I can see that. And it looks like it's bank charges and fees. So I could see that on each one of these lines if I need to execute another level of research. So now that you've created a report and you could see all that information, your next question might be, well, how do I share that within my organization? How do I communicate this to people, or how do I use it inside the organization? Well, we can export it to Excel, another use of the Microsoft stack. Here we see that we could create a new document, or you can update an existing workbook. This allows you to skip that step that I'm sure many of you have made before, where you create an Excel document and then you have to cut and paste the tab and put it in a new workbook, just because that was just the only way we had before. But now we have the ability to update an existing document. So when you update that document, you could add a new tab with the new information and keep a running total if you see fit. Before I leave that concept of the stack, let's take a look at this other tool, which is to print the account schedule. I can choose my starting dates and end dates. We'll just go ahead and use 2017 as presented. But now, instead of printing or previewing, I'm going to send it to one of these other tools right inside the solution. I can create a PDF, Word document, I can send it to Excel. I can even schedule the report if I need to. And this is only one of the reports that are available inside of the account schedules. There are a variety of other reports, and typically during an implementation, what we'll do is we'll teach you how to build these reports so that you can make the report that you need to use for your organization. In fact, what we typically see is when people learn how to build these reports, that they'll also use one of the out-of-the-box options as a foundation, just like the Role Center, and just make a few changes and save it as their own so they can use it in the future. So that was a very high-level look at the financial structure of Business Central. And of course, if you need more personalized information, we can schedule another session to do that. But for now, I'd like to move on to another role. Because remember, I did say that I would like to talk about jobs and project management. In order to do that, let's take a look at another dashboard. That dashboard, in fact, that Role Center, is for our project manager. So now that I've told Business Central, I'd like for you to reconfigure what you're presenting. It's collecting information that would be important to a project manager. And since I'm logged in as me, it would recognize that I may have certain jobs that are more important than others because they're mine. I'm the project manager for that particular job. As I scroll down, there's more graphical representations of the jobs that are important to me. This jobs list is managed at a user level. This doesn't require any code, so that each time you take on a new job, you need to call IT. That's not the case. This is simply just a selection here, and as you select jobs and populate this graphic here, each one of these graphics will update as well. Job 10, job 20, job 10, job 20. If I highlight the particular graphic on the chart, I could see information in relation to that particular job as well, so that I have a quick reference tool in order to see what's happening with each one of my jobs right on my dashboard. And you still have those color-coded lines and these activity queues, just like we did in the other dashboards. There's some menus at the top, and there's that intelligence being presented to us right on our dashboard. So from here, let's take a look at a job itself. I'm going to use the menu navigation this time to access the jobs list. The jobs list includes some I'd say administrative data on this particular view. You saw that my Power BI report populated, and there's some fact box information here as well, so that I could see what's happening with this particular job without ever opening it. But for this exercise, I would like to go ahead and open that job so we can learn more about how jobs are managed inside of Business Central. The structure of a job is the most important concept that needs to be explained today. There's multiple levels inside the job itself. First of all, the job. For this job, we're going to remodel a reception area. Inside of this job, there are multiple phases or group tasks. So at a high level, this planning inspects is one group task, demos another, and installs another. Inside of each one of these group tasks is a task itself. Think of those as activities. Here's some consulting that needs to be completed, as well as some review and sign off, and that will be totaled so I can get a better view, a better feel for what's happening with my organization and for the activities that go along with it. But these are more like deliverables at this point. Let's take a look at the resources and items that are required to get the job done. At a high level look, these planning lines provide another level of detail inside of the job structure. So we talked about the parent job, the group tasks, the tasks inside of those group tasks, and now we're at the planning lines. Each one of those tasks identified on the previous screen have one or more planning lines that go along with it. Those planning lines can be budget, billable, or both. What that means is you can tell Business Central if you're going to track just the cost, just the price you're selling to your client, or you'd like to track both. These lines can either be resources, items, GL expenses, or even free-form text. Here we see resources at play at the beginning of the project, and then we see an item required as the project progresses. But this is an overall look at your job. You may want to see a more detailed look based on a specific task. Let's use demolition for this example. Highlighting my demolition line, I can take a look at what is required for demolition. Here I see that Timothy's needed for 30 hours, and we're going to go ahead and track his cost and what we bill for this particular line item for the demolition for this particular project. There are a variety of modifiers that are available to adjust the way that each job is managed. There's a variety of WIP methods as well as posting techniques that can be used in order to manage the jobs the way that you see fit. For today's exercise, I'd like to take a look at the way that the expenses are tracked and the way that it is billed against a particular job. Here we see some columns on the first screen for our budget cost versus actuals and our pricing. Well, maybe we'd like to learn more about those lines, and we can do that through the ledger entries. We can see what's been billed and what other activities have happened for this particular job. Here we see that Linda's has applied 8 hours to this particular job, and we can see the cost associated with that. Here's our $677.60. If I'd like to see how that compares to the budget numbers, I can use my statistics tool and see that in action. Here I can see which resources, items, or GL account expenses have been applied to the job and how it compares to the budget. Here's a familiar number, $677.60. I can drill from this location as well and get to that same piece of information. This is a prime example of that one version of the truth in action. I can also see integration with the stack. I can edit in Excel. I could drill further into this entry. If there's a timesheet associated with this or some other information associated with this line, I can see that right from this screen as well. And that came from our statistics tool right here on the job card itself. Now for today's exercise, I am not going to go into an incredible amount of detail about the other reports, but I will zoom in just a little bit so we can see the other tools that are available. There's a variety of reports, and analysis tools that can be used in order to further evaluate the success of your job. Ultimately, profitability will be presented so that you can make changes, improve, advance your organization for tomorrow. Because now you're armed with the data in order to better understand what's happening with your organization. So we've had quite a journey today. We started out with the overview. We looked at some financials for Business Central. We also looked at a reporting tool known as account schedules. And we finished up our presentation with jobs and project management. With jobs, as I said, with jobs and project management. Those are only a few of the capabilities inside of Business Central. You saw on the slide earlier in the presentation that there are other areas inside of the solution that, excuse me, that we didn't cover in any level of detail today. Things like manufacturing, things like service, things like deeper item management, in order to help you maximize profitability, maximize efficiency, in order to make sure you have all the tools required to take your business to that next level. And today I challenge you to ask yourself this question: what's your next? What does tomorrow look like for your organization? And then from there, allow us to work with you in order to give you the tools to get there. Thank you for your time today. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason. So we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions. If you do have
Rebecca,
a question.
do we have any questions that came in?
Yes, we do. And if anyone does have any other questions, feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar question box. Our first question is about how much it will cost to get this.
Okay, well, I would say that the cost varies quite a bit, and not on the software side, but more on the implementation side. On the software side, there's two levels that Microsoft offers. There is the Essential Pack, which is $70 per month per user, and there is the Premium Pack, which is $100 per month per user. The variable portion of the equation is the fact that the cost for the services relies very heavily on you and your team. We can certainly identify areas where you can participate more if you'd like to keep the cost at a minimum, or we can use our resources and help you through the project as much as you need. We know that there's certainly some organizations out there that are small and nimble that need our help more than others. So it varies quite a bit, but just know that the software itself has two levels, which are $70 per month per user and $100 per month per user.
Perfect. And how long is a typical implementation?
Once again, that really relies on the organization. That really relies on the activity from the company that will be using the product. I would say that I've seen them implement as quickly as 90 days, and there's certainly projects that have taken a lot longer. So it really relies on how good the information is, how ready the organization is as far as established processes, and how willing they are to accept new processes, because there's always the training curve that has to happen as far as getting your people up to speed, because you certainly don't want to damage your organization by implementing a new solution.
Can I get this on-premise?
Today, the answer is no. There is a fall release that is scheduled by Microsoft that would give you the Business Central tools on-premise, and it would be the same architecture and the same functionalities, but it would be offered on-premise. So today the answer is no, but in fall there should be a tool available.
Okay, and it looks like those are all of the questions we have for today. I want to thank everyone for attending, and that we'll see you next time.
Very good. Thank you.